Hello and welcome to another Blender tutorial brought to you by Luwizart. My name is Emmanuel Okafor. I hope you guys are doing well. Sorry for the no upload for about 3 weeks now. I've been really busy with work and I just got like a break and I'm taking the opportunity to release the new content. So in this Blender tutorial, we'll be trying to recreate a scene from author. Not exactly a scene per se, I recently watched the Merlin movie from 2008. I was kind of binge watching the old stuff which I've watched before. So I got inspired to create something that looks um, like this. So we can see that we have the Excalibur sword. If you're familiar with it, that's the sword also uses made out of dragon breath. So that's what I created here, and we also have like a nice story going on in the background where we see this character trying kind of discovering the sword. Okay, so this is what we're trying to create. So this in this tutorial, the initial record was about 2 hours long, but I kind of shrinked it down to about approximately 48 minutes, and I'll be going through explaining the entire process. So you'll be seeing me modeling the sword, the rock, some texturing tips, and even some compositing trick for the final image. So this should be fun. I hope you guys will enjoy this tutorial. So let's get on it. So for this particular project, I started with the layout. So I consider layouts quite important for like when you're concepting out stuff, and usually even for artwork that have pre-made concept art already. Usually, creating a layout is quite important because it gives you like kind of the rough idea. In 3D, with this, you can place the camera, as you can see I'm doing here. So for this, I usually start with the primary focus for that scene. So for this, I'm focusing on just the rough layout of the rock and the sword. So I just want to get like the look, the placement, and as you can, I'm not focusing on like little details. I'm just focusing on the broader picture. And once I get that going, I'm just going to make the work more easier in the future, along the process. So now along this process of creating a layout, that's why I came up with this idea of having like a character in the background, kind of discovering the sword. Because my initial plan was to just have the rock sitting there with the sword, but I just thought it would be like adding a character is going to add more interest to it. So once I have the layout done, and I will start creating the individual assets. This allows me to have really high quality assets for that scene because you might want to, like when starting out, most beginners might decide to just model everything in that one scene, which works, but it kind of reduces the quality because now your scene is going to get crowded quite fast. So I decided to work with ZBrush and sculpting the shrug. It's just because my own personal preference. You can definitely achieve exactly the same thing inside Blender. So basically, as you can see, I just added a sphere, kind of created a rough shape of the rock, and grabbed the flattening brush and just kind of created some planar surface. And once I'm done, I will unwrap the base mesh model using ZBrush tool. Blender has very decent UV mapping tool, so you could use that. And once I have like the base mesh to work with, now I will start adding some procedural displacement. So in ZBrush, there's something called the noise maker. So that's what I'm using to create like rock patterns. So just break it up. Yeah, these are just like technical things that apply just to ZBrush. I kind of by default is set to like the 3D. I switched it to UV because it's more predictable. And since you're going to bake it out onto the mesh, you want to make sure it's using the UVs. Okay, so now I'm just going to like sharpen those edges because I want it to feel like a rock. So that's what I'm doing here, just sharpening the edges to bring out those details. So if you notice, I'm not trying to go really crazy. I'm just taking gradually because I also know that the main details from the rock will not just be coming from my sculpt. I also at this point knew I was going to get textures, like PBR textures of rock online and apply it. So with that considered, I didn't put so much effort in detailing or adding those fine details onto the rock. So here in Blender, I've imported the rock. So I'm just setting up the scene. I usually use HDR for my look dev process. I just feel this is quite easy. I could easily just rotate the HDR to match lighting. Don't really need to worry about setting up sun lamps and point lamps. HDR does the trick very well for testing out. And now I'm just going to load in the normal map from ZBrush, which I created, also the bump map, and just to get the initial details. I kind of made like a mistake when exporting the textures from ZBrush, but I fixed it. The mistake I made was I forgot to check the flip V. So it's like something that applies just to ZBrush. So you need to always check on that when you're exporting your textures. So for the roughness map, I decided to use the displacement in conjunction or in addition with like just a random grunge map, kind of blended them in together to create like a rough map, which usually works. So I'm getting the displacement map and converting it to the color ramp and just blending everything together. And yeah, as you can see, it's going to give like a decent result that matches the detailing of the rock. So now I'm just tweaking everything to make it match. So this process, I'm quite happy with how it looks. It's not perfect, but we're almost there. So there are a lot of free content, free sites where you could get textures. So for this is 3dassets.com. You can get a lot of free PBR textures. So I'm going to be using a couple in this video. So I'm going to be showing you, I'm going to try to put the link in the description. So this is 3dasset.com. And I got like a green grass texture and also like a rock texture. My goal is to kind of blend it since the the kind of environment we're trying to create has like the blend of like the green and the muddy. So that's what I was trying to go for the textures. So it's with PBR texture, it's quite straightforward. It already has everything pre-made, and the great thing is it also has it's styled. You can tile it. That means you can scale it up, and which is really helpful. So I just went ahead and scaled it up to match the size of the rock, and now just import the other necessary texture, which is the green land texture. And now I'm going to use the Vectex color to blend between those two images, which is really powerful. It's kind of giving you like a very creative freedom, especially with Eevee. You can just actually turn on the material preview while you do everything, so you can actually see it live. So basically, the way I'm going about this is like for the parts closer to the soil, I'm painting it the greenish, and like also some those place that has some cavity, I also place some greenish. My mindset is like grass usually grows on moist, usually grow where there's moisture, and those places are usually located either at the bottom or where there's like a crevice. So that's that, and now I'm just getting the using the color information, which is not so detailed, but it works for this instance to just create like a rough bump map and then combine it, that we can also see some details from the color. And that's how I got the rock. So this is the final look for the rock, and it is quite helpful to the sense that you can just quickly see how everything looks in the scene. So finally, to add like a final touch to the rock, I know this is not conventional, but I don't know. I wanted to get like really fine details onto the rock. So what I wanted to create is like some flakes that are just sticking out of the rock that kind of add like those little details to even push it even further. So if you hold on Control Alt and just drag on your object, you can create that nice um, gradient fall off with the weight. So that's what you saw happening there. So now I'm just creating like a collection so that I can apply those flakes as instant objects onto the rock. And I'm just setting it up. It took me a while to like get the look I was going for because initially I wanted it to be like poking out of the rock, but when I rendered it, it didn't look so great. So I decided or settled at making it rest at the rock, which we'll get to in a bit. So basically, all I'm doing is just playing with the settings, and you can access the settings by checking on advanced option inside the particle system, even when you're using hair or the emitter. This gives you more parameter to control. Like for example, you can control the rotation of each object. You can like randomize it to create the various effects, which was really helpful in this project. So once I got like something I was okay with, the next is to like just copy the textures of the rock, just to make it blend in nicely and not look so messy. So through this, throughout the entire process now, I'm just like tweaking the rock, the scale of the rock, the placement, just to make everything feel good. Yeah, just the basic goal with this is just to like add that extra detail that like pushes it even further. And then by the end of it, I was kind of happy with how it turned out. So it's not perfect, but like for what I was going for, it did the trick perfectly for me. So now I'm happy with it. So I'm going to convert it into a mesh, which seems like a lot, but I decimated it so that I'm working with very low geometry count. Like I'm already anticipating that since I'm creating like an environment where I'll be adding a lot of elements, definitely geometry, the poly count is quite necessary to curate at the early points. So I'm also keeping that in mind while I go through this entire process of creating the rock. So at this point, I'm quite happy with how it's looking. It's kind of not so distracting. And I'm done with this part, and we're moving on to the next part. So now, basically, all I'm doing is just replacing all those layout assets with the high res or final assets. So that's the entire process of this. It kind of organizes everything so you can see how much progress you're making. If you notice, I'm just focusing on the main elements for now. The later elements that don't need much like customization will come in later. So the next object that needed customization was the sword object. So I needed to create it from scratch. I got like some reference online of just a nice looking sword. And so I went with that. So it's just basically standard for most part. using the basic modeling tool and some modifier to automate or to speed up some tasks. So this is just a extrude process. So you can hit E inside Blender to extrude. You can add edge loops by hitting Ctrl R, scale it, and so I'm also using Alt S to kind of inflate the object in case I feel it's too skinny. Okay, so this is where like the fun process started, or I started using a lot of modifiers in the process, mainly the mirror modifier. So like if you've used mirror modifier, I'm just using the basic one where you have like X symmetry. But for this, I'm going to be using multiple symmetries to create like multiple objects. So for now, this is just X symmetry. If you notice, I'm kind of creating some weird edges. That is to preserve those edges. So I wanted when I add subdivision, everything just looks nice. So that's why most of the edges look the way they look. So now I'm just using another symmetry with an empty as the pivot, probably the middle area. So I just enabled Y, so that's how I'm doing this. So now I'm happy with that shape. I'm just going to add like a bevel modifier. I'm just going to bevel it inside. I'm controlling everything. Like I usually prefer to have full control over everything. I know like going procedural or like setting up systems that do stuff automatically is good. But usually for most part, I usually have to like to like actually control everything, which I know it's kind of quite destructive modeling technique, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I usually don't add too much detail, so I can always go back. And yeah, so now what I'm doing now is just scaling up um, some of the faces to match the sword hold at the bottom, and now just tweaking and making everything look good. So I'm using the proportional edit. Once you're using the proportional edit, you should be watching like the header where you have like info. It's quite helpful. I mean, it's not such a big thing, but I just found out, and it's quite helpful that you can actually see the value of the professional edits, and you can help. It can even help you work much better. Okay, so I'm modeling the blade now. So as you can watch the way I'm doing it. So just extruding. So the reason I'm doing this way is to create a predictable topology that works best for blades, because just using a flat plane, you will run into a lot of issues. But this kind of topology works really well for blades. It creates like nice pointy edge easily. You can have that nice detail at the middle of the sword, which is cool. You can even have that side sharpness. So at first I wanted to use like a sort of define modifier to kind of extrude the sword to give it depth, but it didn't work out because it was kind of just it was not acting as the way I wanted. So I would do away with that and use the mirror modifier instead. So basically, what I did for the previous object, added like an empty to be the mirror object. Of course, it has to be in the right position. And now all I will just go ahead and do is set it up. So you can also use the mirror object to place it at the right position. That's what I did. And now with this, I can just start combining everything. I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Um, no, this is people usually like short content, but I'm just trying some content probably to make up for my long absence. And by the way, I thank all the new subscribers that are joining this channel. It's quite awesome that you guys find my content quite interesting. And I hope to keep providing more quality content for you guys. Okay, so now I'm done with the main shape, and what I'm just going ahead to do now is to bevel those nice edges that I'm happy with, so I can preserve them even when I add the subdivision modifier. So I'm actually quite happy and proud of how the sword came out. So I'm just using Alt S to kind of inflate like that because it looked so skinny. So we need to make it bigger. For this final process is the detailing time. So for the detailing, I'm just um, using like a plane with the snapping turned on and just extruding roughly like a retopology process, but just trying to get the nice detail which I was going for. So with this solidifier turned on, I will just extrude it just to kind of match the detail which I'm going for. Like Blender modifiers are quite actually quite helpful because they really speed up a lot of process. So with this, I just wanted to get the first stroke. After that, I'm going to be using the array modifier. Excuse me. So now, using the array modifier, I'm just going to place it in the right position. And then I'm going to use the shrink wrap modifier to make sure that each of those details are attached to the underlying model. The basic thing is just placing it at the right position. So you want to place the shrink wrap always above the solidifier so that everything snaps onto the underlying model and you can just extrude it with the solidifier modifier. That's basically what I was doing. And now I'm just tweaking it on how much compressed I want it or how long I wanted it. So after it, I'm just going to convert into the mesh, and that is that for the detailing. So for the next process is just going in and just tweaking everything finally, and then UV unwrapping the entire model. So the UV process is quite easy. You just select edges, create edge loops by hitting U. You will see the maxim, and you can create like an edge loop. You can create like a edge sim, and this edge sim are going to be used to cut the geometry itself. So quite helpful. So once I'm happy with it, I combine the entire geometry into one object, and now I'm just going to set it up for exports because I plan to texture it in Substance Painter. Okay, so now we're going to go into Substance Painter. For this project, I try to use. Recently, I started trying to use more different programs to create different things. That are different programs that are quite more specialized in creating those things than Blender. I found that it kind of improved the quality of the entire project. So I usually start first to bake out the map, because like most of the textures I'm using in Substance Painter are created with like smart materials or I already have like pre-made channels for like the ambient occlusion, the world map. So that's why I usually bake it out first so I could take advantage of those nice tools. So now you just watch me like just randomly selecting different materials because I was not sure. I had like a reference, I knew what I was looking for, but I was kind of looking for the right material that right off the back matched what I was going for so that I can just tweak it slightly to get what I want. So this one looks promising, but it didn't work out, so I changed that. Think I ended up with this one. Okay, so for the next project process, it's just selecting and masking out everything. So there are a lot of intuitive tools inside Substance Painter that allows you to just select geometry and apply mask. It was quite helpful. And now I'm moving into the final material, which is the rubber material. So I'm looking for the perfect rubber. So my usual workflow of with Substance Painter is first of all to take advantage of the tools it has and like nice smart materials. And those are my I then go ahead to build on top that rather than starting from scratch. So now once I just get the material I want, I'll just go ahead and start customizing things. I found that that way works even better because you get the best of both world where you're getting like faster workflow, which Substance Painter was made for, and also you're able to be creative and improve the details of everything you're working with. So I'm just adding like more details to break up the cleanness of the shaders or the materials. So now for the next process, for the I wanted to add like some sets of details on the sword to just kind of improve the look. So you could add like some mechanical looking or hard surface looking details in Substance Painter or even Blender, just using like a white or black texture. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm just looking for like any nice looking pattern or shape that looks interesting that I could just play around with to just kind of break up the surface and make it look a bit mysterious because we're dealing with like a fantasy universe. So that's what I was just trying to achieve here. So once I'm happy with it, I'm just going to export the texture into Blender. And the awesome thing about PBR is because it's PBR, so you just load in all the textures and just plug it in, and automatically it works. So you want to also make sure, like for parameters that don't use color, like the roughness, the specularity value. I'm not talking referring to the specularity color. So for like values, you definitely want to always use like set it to non-color. So what I just did there was kind of fix like some grunginess that was on texture, so it was so harsh. I needed to reduce it. So it's same process. I'm happy with it, and then I load in the final asset into Blender and make it work. So at this point, I wanted to start lighting the scene, just to start getting like a rough layout of the lighting so that I can start shading the scene finally. So there's something I usually add in my HDR, which is the gamma. It tends to add like some contrast to the HDRI. So I usually just add it anytime I need more contrast. And now I'm, like I said, trying to get the right rough estimation of the lighting of the scene. So I knew it's going to be coming from like a side, kind of revealing the sword, and also using the trick of using um, invisible object to create shadows. That's what I'm doing here. So with the sunlight there, I'm just adding like a lot of cylinders to kind of give the illusion of a lot of trees being there, though they will not be visible in the camera, which is cool. So that's what I'm doing there, just duplicating. And now I'm adding like some point light to kind of emphasize on the hero objects, which is the rock and the sword. So that's what I'm doing here. So this is not going to be my final lighting, but this is roughly the same process I'm going to use for the final lighting. Because like if I need these custom lights are quite important. That's kind of like help emphasize on your primary object, and it will be quite harder to achieve using like all the photorealistic or realistic lighting settings without really blowing up or blowing out the image or messing things more. So like creating like lots of small point light or area light just to emphasize things are quite helpful in the lighting process. So I try to keep my scene as organized as possible. So that's what is so going happening there. So for the character at the background, I didn't want to create a character from scratch, but I have a pre-made like Viking character, which I did for some old assets previously. It's been a long time, so I just got that scene, that asset, and since I knew it's going to be in the distance, it was perfect for what I needed. So and it was already rigged, which was great. So that's what I just imported into the final scene to use as that as the character. So for the ground shading, basically it was quite straightforward. I went ahead to import like textures from Textures Heaven. So it's like I think it's from same creators of HDR Heaven. So that's I just went ahead, downloaded the map. So the texture I found was quite powerful, helpful, because it was quite straightforward. It had like exactly what I was looking for, and since it was a PBR texture, you just have to plug in all the necessary sockets, and you should be done with that. And that's what I did here, and automatically to give you the appropriate look which you're going for. So as you can see, I'm also kind of creating like a custom light for the character itself at the background because I need like all the primary object to be visible. So like with this kind of concept image, you want to be able to control where the audience are looking. So for the tree, I usually use a free program called Tree It. So it works for most projects. So I just got like a tree from its pre-made assets and tried to like customize some parameters, kind of made it have like bigger roots. Just tried some random things, but it's mostly buggy sometimes, but it works. And once I'm kind of happy with what I see, then I can export it into Blender. So if you notice, I'm always starting with a new scene. That's to make sure you're getting like efficiency and high quality throughout the entire process. So here I'm just setting up the shader, adding the transparency, its specularity, and just making sure everything is set for the final scene. So for this, I know that at least one tree will be really close to the camera. So what I went ahead and did was to add this multi-res modifier and kind of sculpted on it, just to kind of emphasize the details so it looks more high res than it actually is, just to get more details going there. And yeah, Though this high res will not be used for the entire tree, it will just be used for the just one the tree that closest to the camera. For the rest, I'll just delete the high res modifier, so it will not slow down my render or add more memory. So now the process is to just go ahead and import load in the model. So for project like this, since it's not like a big animation project, I usually just append it rather than link it, so that I can sit tweak every necessary thing that I need in the entire process. Probably in the future where we have like better a great asset manager that handles these things better, probably that will not be necessary. You just link everything and everything just works. So now I'm just hand placing all these three to match the initial setup which I did, trying to create like a frame for the character. It's just like going around setting up and trying to make sure it looks nice. Like I usually have go so many passes with this, so I have this and then I try to render. So if you notice, like my scene was crashing a lot. Um, it's been a while since I experienced like a lot of crashing. I think it's because I'm using like the 2.9. I usually download the daily builds from time to time, and I think that's why I'm experiencing this. Might just be some known bug. But yeah, so I just go ahead adding the trees, and to roughly get what I want, then I will of course go ahead and render it. And if it doesn't look so great, then I would definitely I'm always open to keep tweaking it till I'm happy with it. So for this process, like I said, these are like objects that don't need more customization. So I have like some as saved nature asset like a free scan object. So that's what I'm using. So I'll be importing a lot of those kind of objects, like the one you can see on the floor now. So, like for the fillings, I'm talking about the grasses, the stuff on the ground. So that's what I'm going to be loading in from pre-made assets. So I'm using rigid body here. This is like asset called like falling trees. So it's kind of I'm just going to use the rigid body to just spray it on the entire scene. Took me like a couple of tries to get everything set up perfectly. But after I did it, it looked awesome. So once I just have like a rough look, then I will delete those ones that kind of fell through the geometry, so I don't have to worry about them. Okay, so I've gone ahead to give a test render on how it's looking, and yeah, so I'm liking it. For the next process, it starts to add the grass. So this is also a pre-made scan grass. So I'll first go ahead and create like the area where I want it to cover. So I'm just painting within within the camera, so that I'm very efficient as possible. So load into grass, put them inside group, and that's that. Just going ahead, adding a particle system. I'm using here for this. Set it to collection, scale it up. Go ahead and check on advanced. It gives you more control. So now you can create customized rotation quite easily with using that. So you can play with the rotation of each particular system to just create some randomness. And then I'll use the interpolated children to kind of fill everything up to get my grass in. So for the next is to create the plants because you want to have like variety of um, biomes growing there. So you want to have grass, you want to have plants. So that's what I did here. Though I could even add more if necessary, but like plants is okay. Just having two is okay. So also using the advanced rotation, I'm going to like customize rotation to make it seem natural. Add like the children particles and yeah. Okay, so everything is looking great. We're almost done. So I'm just hand placing everything again to fix it. So for the final step, I just clean up the scene and then I will create the background. So for the background, I've gone ahead and loaded in like an image plane of like a forest background that looks like this. And now all I do is just place it in the right position to make it blend in with the 3D environment. And then I duplicate as needed. Just fill everything up. So as you can see, it just blends naturally because it has the same color and everything just works. So at this point, everything is looking good. We'll soon be going to the final lighting. So for the final lighting, my process is also quite straightforward. I first start with getting like the fill light of the entire sky, so like blue. I can do that with HDR. And next, I'm going to add like the first sun lamp, where I want to really get those nice forest details, like as you can see here on the screen. So trying to get those nice shadows of trees and like light direction. So at this point now, I noticed like the point light which I created earlier, which was nice, but they seemed so artificial. So my goal now is to kind of make it do the same work it was doing previously, but feel natural. That's what I spent like lots of time doing. Kind of was trying to get like a rain effect on the stone to mainly break it off from the background and just make the hero assets stand out. So also the sword, I wanted to like make it shine because it's a mystical stud. So you want to like bring out the essence of it. So basically, I'm playing with the light power, also playing with the radius as needed. So usually I create my lighting with HDR, but for this scene, I needed to control how everything looks. So I needed to like use point light and like traditional lighting. So for the character, same thing. I didn't want the lighting to feel artificial, so I tried to avoid that. I just tried to make it feel as natural as possible, and I think overall I ended up with a good result. So this is the final rendering with after the lighting. And now we'll go into the compositor. This is where I call my kitchen because I usually in the image actually comes out looking quite different from what I add to it, what I give it. So I really consider compositing like a very important process for my final work. So I'm using the crypto mark to really just get like different passes. I found that the tree was quite reddish, and it was kind of standing out from the other assets. So I wanted to tone that down a bit. So I'm just using the color balance to make sure that it doesn't stand out as much. Kind of reducing the red, darkening it some bit, some more. Just to make when you look at this image, you're just focusing on the main thing I want you to focus on. Also added some green so that it can blend with the greenish environment before we move ahead and like for our final color correction. So I wanted to add like an ambient occlusion, but for this scene it was not necessary, or it kind of broke most of what I was going for, so I just forgot that. Now I'm using the mist path to add some like volume coming from the background to make it feel more natural, and I'll use the color ramp to control the color. So I also added like glare to add some kind of mystical stuff to the sword so that you can get some kind of uh, glare on the sword. So now the entire process here is just color correcting the entire image, giving it like a theme color. So even at this point, this is not like the final render because I also did some tweaks after this. I changed the posing of the guy in the background. If you can see his posing up is quite distracting because it seems like he's reaching for something, and that's not I want the viewer to experience. I want you to find him there, but I don't want him to be like the main focus. My main focus is like the sword. So I did that. I kind of made his pose quite natural, like he's just standing as if he realized something rather than him reaching for something. So I'll just keep playing with this. And my final source for all my projects, I usually like to add the sharpen. Even though like the image is already high quality, I just like the look of the sharpen effect. So I wanted to add like a lens abreast this lens distortion, but I decided to take it out later. Also now, what I'm doing here is still using the cryptomites to kind of create like a separate path for like the tree in the front because I found that it was still quite distracting to me. So I needed to have like a one to one control to it to really tone it down as needed. So I added like a soften to soften the tree. So I'm happy with the composition. So I'm comparing between the two, so you can see like there are a lot of this big difference between the final image and the composited image, and I'm quite happy with it. And now I'm prepped for final render. So my sample I'm setting to 500 using the black hairs. For the light part, I kind of went crazy with my settings. I'm using 101 to 8 for everything, and I'm using reflective and refractive caustic. for the entire image. So here's the final image. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I did. Bye bye for now. See you next time.